School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Saskatchewan Pulse Growers and BASF.
Welcome to Real Agriculture's Pulse School series. I'm Kara Oosterhuis. In this episode, I talked to Robyne Bowness-Davidson, who is a pulse research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Lacombe. Robyne and I talk about root rot, what you need to look for when scouting for it, as well as what damages it can cause overall to your pulse crop.
Yeah. Well, now that the pulse crops are up, aside from the pea leaf weevil, we now have some pathogens that are going to start causing a problem. So I would recommend the farmers keep an eye on their plants for the next month or so. In the next month, the problems are mostly going to be root rot. And we have the root rot complex, which has 4 different pathogens in it. So there's rhizoctonia, fusarium, and pythium. Those are the 3 that have been part of the root rot complex that we're quite familiar with. These 3 pathogens are quite easily controlled with seed treatment. And so if farmers have treated their seed, they should be okay. And what happens is it protects those seedlings from those 3 pathogens until the plant starts to get a little bit bigger and the root system gets stronger, and then the plant itself can usually grow through these root rots. With fusarium, you'll tend to see some darkening on the taproot, right where the seed was attached. With rhizoctonia, you'll see mostly right at the soil line. You'll see this darkening, this girdling or squeezing off of the roots right at the soil line. With pythium is a water mold, so it's just the roots will have a watery kind of appearance and be kind of mushy. And so those are the 3 pathogens that we are familiar with, and we know that if we seed treat for it, we should have some success. The one that's been causing problems recently has been Aphanomyces. Aphanomyces is a pathogen that is very specific to legume crops or to pulse crops, and it is not controllable with seed treatments. So this is the root disease that we've heard a lot of buzz about in the past number of years, is because there's not really a whole lot we can do. There is a product out there called Intego Solo. It's ethoboxam, and it's put out by a chemical company out there, and it does offer a little bit of suppression. So if you add it into your seed treatments for the other seed treatment for the other pathogens, you can get some suppression of Aphanomyces, but it's a very aggressive pathogen that comes in early. So my advice is to be out there pulling up some plants. If you see some necrot, some necrosis, or some chlorosis or yellowing of the plants in the field, pull them up, take a look at the roots and see what's going on. And if you suspect that you might have root rot in your field, there's unfortunately not a lot you can do. You can maybe keep an eye on them, keep an eye on nodulation. If it's rhizoctonia, fusarium, or pythium, if the soils dry up and the plant is able to continue growing and is healthy, you've controlled your weeds, you've given it the inoculant it needs, you're doing everything else right, you have a high chance of it growing through it. Aphanomyces is still one of those ones that we're not really sure about. The problem with that disease is sometimes you don't notice it till closer to flowering. And then once you're closer to flowering, the root system is completely gone. By that time, it's really hard to know exactly what caused it, because Aphanomyces might have been there first, but then fusarium may have moved in afterwards. So there's a lot of research going on currently right now. I have to give credit to Dr. Shamma Chatterton with Ag Canada. She's the one that's leading all this research. So we're working together with her to try to get a handle on this disease. So we'll keep you posted with more research as we get more information. So,
how much does something like root rot affect the final product of the crop?
Again, if it's your early seedling root rot that's happening early in the season and you've used seed treatment, you might see some damage to the roots. But like I said, if it dries up, or if your seed treatments are working, and you've done everything else right, a lot of times it can grow through it. You might look at the roots and you might see that they don't look 100% healthy, but in a lot of cases it can grow through it. So that is one of those things that is the million-dollar question. We're not exactly sure. Again, with Aphanomyces being one that we've only worked with recently over the past few years, that one tends to be more devastating. Yield losses, again, are really hard to grasp a hold of. It could be 20%. Sometimes, we have seen some fields where the Aphanomyces is so bad where we've we've lost like 80% of our yield. It's just come in and completely taken over. That usually happens in the wetter soils, the heavier soils, the more compacted soils, things like that. So it's really hard to know exactly what's going on below ground unless you can pull it up. And you have to be diligently on top of it all the time and follow it through the season to really know exactly how much yield loss and what you can attribute it to, because there's a lot of things that can happen throughout the year, right? Drought, excess water. Again, if the pea leaf weevils are coming and eating all your nodules, it could be related to that. So it's kind of a bit of a complex issue to grab a hold of. So,
is root rot only developed at the seedling stage, or can it be seen at any stage?
Root rot tends to happen early. It tends to happen within the first month or so. So after the plants have started to come up, so maybe a week or two after seeding, you'll start to see them emerge. And then usually within the next few weeks after that, that's when the root rots that's when the soils are coolest, usually the most wet, and that's when the pathogens are just sitting there kind of waiting. Root rot can develop later on in the season, but it does tend to be more of an early season problem that we talk about. Again, you could have root rots early in the season that are not showing up until later. So the plant grew through it in the spring, got a nice root system, was doing fine, and then all of a sudden we hit some drier patches in end of July, early August, and you're like, oh no, and you think the root rot moved in then? Probably not. It probably moved in earlier. We're just seeing the results now that the plant is stressed for other reasons.